The BMW M5. You really don't have to say much more, and just about any automotive enthusiast is already picturing a car. It may be the newest all-wheel drive monster, the V10 that didn't get the love it deserved, or maybe the very first, a 6-cylinder, individual throttle body powered wonder. It wasn't until 26 years later that the M5 first caught my eye with the iconic E39 M5.
Yeah, yep. Always feels good to sit in this car. Welcome back to the shop. I'm Jason, and this is my 2002 E39 M5 track build. Codename, Project Bad Decision. Today what I want to do is I want to cover how I got to this point, why I got to this point, why I even chose this car for such a silly purpose, and what we've done to it. So let's start it off with a story. Off June 20th, 2017, and 24 hours later, I was already tearing into it. Between doing a bunch of maintenance and getting it up to date, getting the paint looking good, I was busy all the time. Here I was taking apart the rear view mirror and getting that situation all corrected. The instrument cluster, a common failure point, was next. Went in, replaced the pixels, got everything looking brand new, and I was super happy with that end result. Next, for good measure, a new steering wheel with beautiful perforated leather, and then moved on to the brake system. I rebuilt all the calipers, sandblasted all the parts that were going to stay on it, replaced the seals, added ECS stainless lines, and the spring brackets. Then, I was moving. Yet again, I do that a lot. Here I got to my dream house with a dream shop and kept on the progress. Next, for sway bar, I did the 540 rear Eibach bar, BC coilovers, the rear subframe inserts, all new control arms front and rear, added a Mason front steering brace, and then was ready for some audio work. And this was when the real addiction started. I started doing autocross days and started really enjoying it. So keeping the cooling system fresh, keeping the brakes fresh was top of mind, top of priority. And at this point, I started thinking, well, what if the car was a little lighter, and started stripping it down. The interior was truly mint on this car, and I wound up selling all of it to one person, which helped to fund all of the projects moving forward from that point. So I started slowly ripping everything apart, checking to make sure everything worked, weighing every single thing I took out of the car, and I have a pretty solid spreadsheet of all of the weights of everything. Likewise, I weighed everything that was going back in the car, so I knew what the differential was between them to get an idea of what my weight basis was going to be at this point. With the interior stripped out, it was time to move on to how am I going to get in and out of this car, so a set of OMP seats was top of mind. I really took my time with pulling the rest of the car apart. Lots and lots of wiring in these cars, as you know. And what I did was I broke it down pin by pin by pin, pulling everything apart. Here I'm dry ice freezing all of the insulation to get that out. And that took a lot of work. Then I scraped off all the little pieces, worked on more wiring. All in all, I had many months of wiring into the car in my spare time, obviously. And here I was at the track, 3,620 pounds with those OMPs, no roll cage, no roll bar, no nothing, and still a lot more wiring and insulation to take out. I was really only halfway through the process at this point at 3,600 pounds. Then it was time for some other weight. How about some Super Sprint headers? So Super Sprint headers, HPS intake, stock boxes, resonator in the back, and then I was ready for a dyno day. Almost 400 horse to the wheels. It was pretty awesome. Here's more wires. There's wires coming out my ears at this point. And more parts that I was pulling off the car, taking pictures of, and trying to sell. What a time it's been. At this point, we've already moved yet again. Now we're in Phoenix and I'm working on that roll cage. This was a pretty tedious process, having never done this before. I didn't even have a tube bender before this time frame. So I stripped the car down, stitch welded a bunch of seams, and basically just started going for it. I made a bunch of templates out of cardboard, out of wire, out of anything that I could, and I focused really intently on getting everything to be right. At least the best that I was able to figure out through all the different rule books that I was reading. I wanted good tight fitment, I wanted solid penetration on the welds, and I wanted everything to fit the way that I wanted it at the end of the day. It didn't really matter what anybody else thought. I put everything where I was going to have great access to welding, and it was a nice tight fit up. This was a lot of work. I used 10 gauge plate everywhere in the car, reinforced everything on the backside with 10 gauge, spent a considerable amount of time cutting everything to fit just right. And I really didn't waste much tube in all of this either. I took a lot of time to make sure that it was coming together and I wasn't gonna waste anything because I'm pretty darn cheap. So this stuff at the time, this was after the Cerveza virus really started getting crazy. So metal had gotten super duper expensive, and this DOM is 1 3/4, 120 wall. And I ran 120 wall because the original starting weight of the car, I wanted to make sure that I was going to fit all the different classes with this weight. Running NASCAR bars because this really does help me get in and out of the car a lot easier. Pulling the hood apart, running quick clip pins, race latches, and here we are with the car almost done at this point. Had to drop the tank to do a bunch of welding underneath to get my plates lined up without setting myself on fire. Did a 4-port fire safe system, a FIA battery disconnect in the middle, and a secondary on the side of the vehicle that you could reach into. Decided to add in some hood ventilation to get a little bit of downforce and a lot more cooling out of the front of the car, with one more fire extinguisher on the inside. The ugly tips that everybody hates, and some MagnaFlow straight through mufflers. Here we are today. We're basically caught up at this point. I'm sure I missed a ton of stuff. This build hasn't been anything that I've done with YouTube, so I just had to dig through all the pictures that I could find to get up to this point. You can really see that I am prepped for basically any type of track experience that I want to do, but right now what I've been doing is mainly just autocross. In this form, I haven't had the car on the big track. I'd like to get a new set of tires before I get out there. Autocross has been a great way for me to break it in and really understand how it feels in this form. It is super duper nose heavy, which you're gonna see here up in a moment once I got it re-weighed. With the cage in there, I added a ton of weight back to the car. And right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to pull more weight out and give it some front downforce. Here we are on weigh-in day at 3,428 pounds. So now that you're caught up on how the car got to this point, let's chat a little bit about why it got to this point, because that's probably the number one question I get. Why in the world would you pick this big, giant, heavy, theoretically slow car to make a track build? Well, the answer really is pretty simple. On accident. See, I bought this car because I fit in it really well with a helmet on, and at the time, I could not find anything in my price range, important caveat there, that I could get in, throw a helmet on, and hit a track day on occasion when I wanted to. And that was really important to me because I had been racing a Focus ST it was just about a year. I had built that car, was racing it, having a fabulous time, sold it, bought another car, sold that one, and then I really wanted to get back onto the track with something just for fun. It was really only just before COVID happened that something went screwy in here. I mean, I am kind of lost in my head, and I decided, well, let's see if we can make this a little bit more fun. And it really did just snowball into Project Bad Decision as we see it today. So that really does answer that question. Why? It was an accident. I was just looking to have some fun, and sometimes you do what you do with it. See, at the time that I started playing with this in 2019, COVID hadn't happened. The prices hadn't gone totally bonkers on this. I picked this car up for $11,000. To me, I was like, oh, I'll just buy another one. Well, now, cars in this condition, at least the condition that I bought it in, with 160,000 miles, those are $20,000+ cars. That's insane. But hey, it is what it is. I hope you all sell your cars for as much money as you possibly can, because someday I'm going to want to sell this and move on to a different project. Which leads me to the point of, if you're curious about this car, maybe you want to buy it, reach out. Who knows? I might sell it sooner than later. But let's talk about where the car is a little more specifically now with the components that I have on it and some of my future plans as I continue to play with it, assuming I keep it for any indefinite period of time. So we'll start with the front aero. We've got this big splitter on there. It goes all the way back midway to the engine. Just above that, you can just barely see that cooler down in there. That is a secondary power steering cooler. I have the stock power steering cooler inside there, and those two are looped together with a custom set of fittings that I had made. For cooling capability, we've got a CSF radiator. Let's see if I can get this camera to rotate. CSF radiator, Zionsville tank cap and shroud with a Spall fan. And then I'm running a Durelli fan controller, HPS intake boots. I am running MAF still. I'm not running an Alpha N tune. Stock boxes. The boxes are ported down on the bottom to the empty fog lights through 4-inch ducts. For the power steering system, I am running an AGA reservoir through that cooling upgrade that I did, the Mason front strut bar, and the Kevin Anderson heat shield here on my ABS DSC unit. Hiding back where the microfilter housings would normally be, you can see that little red dot on both sides. Those are my fire nozzles pointed at the back of the fuel rail. The suspension was all brand new at about 162,000 miles. I replaced all the arms front to back, and then at 164,000 miles, I took all the arms back off, pushed out the factory bushings, and I installed PowerFlex polyurethane bushings and everything. New engine mounts, new tranny mounts, and then in the rear, we put a Einhorn unicorn nugget. Not what I was trying to do. Unicorn nugget in the back, reinforced the subframe, and then I put solid polyurethane bushings in the subframe mounts as well. So front to back, everything has been replaced in the suspension, the bushings, anything that holds anything in place. The shifter is a Turner Motorsport double shear with a 545 short throw shifter, and everything in that is either Einhorn or polyurethane, all been upgraded as well. Moving inside, you can see I have the doors currently trimmed to fit the roll cage. I kept the factory steering column for now. I did take the motors out and I lightened it as much as possible. I have an NRG quick disconnect with my Sparco steering wheel. I'm running the RaceQuip center net. On the outside, I have another one for a window net when needed. The harnesses are Sabelt 6 points. And then on the back, I'm using a Renline roller to coil those up so that they look nice and neat. You can see the fire bottle over there. I have started to strip the doors. You can see that one is cut. I've taken 15 pounds out of that door. I need to take some more weight out of this one, likewise with the fronts. And I'm also planning to strip the hood of a lot of the bracing and the trunk of a lot of its bracing. Up front, you can see that the headlights are gone. I don't race at night. I do have tail lights still. These are just lenses, there's nothing else there. The bumper inside is basically Swiss cheese. The crash mounts have been reduced down to almost nothing. And it's a bit lighter off of the front. I'm working on a video now with those specific changes, and I have all the weights for everything that I've changed in that regard as well. I'll be doing the same stuff in the back to make sure that I can get as much weight out of the car as possible. I know that this car will never be light, but my goal for it would be 3,200 pounds. I have found that there is a manufacturer that makes fiberglass doors, a fiberglass hood, trunk, and there's even a carbon fiber roof out there, all of which are outside of my current budget standpoint, maybe in somebody else's budget someday, but that is yet to be seen. The wheels are Apex Arc 8. They are E39 fitment, ET22s. Up front, I'm running a 5mm spacer, studs all around, with 275/35 tires. The next tire that I plan to run is a Hoosier A7. These are currently the Potenza RE71Rs, and they have been an excellent tire on this car. They've been able to handle the weight, don't really overheat much, and have amazing traction. Out in the back, we've got our wicker bill, which does more looking than it does actually modifying the aero, I think. I haven't really driven fast enough yet to find out. Like I was saying, I'm going to be stripping the trunk of any additional weight there. Back here, I've basically got everything stripped out already. There's very little left. There's no fuse box because I've consolidated everything down to the front. I am still running a factory battery. And everybody's favorite exhaust tips. So the reason that I have these on here is so that I can loosen them up and I can direct the sound one way or the other for the different tracks that are in this area. The primary track that I'd like to run on, Arizona Motorsports Park, has a 96 decibel sound limit, and my car exceeds that by just a couple. So by putting those tips on there and turning it away from the sound meter, I'm able to get my sound sticker and pass tech. So that pretty much wraps up the car at this point. I have the rest of the doors to cover, taken some more weight out of them, the hood, the trunk, and that's really about it for now. Once I have the money saved up for the Hoosier A7s, I'll be running some slicks and see what that's like. For future plans, I would like to change out the hubs to the E60 hubs. That way I have a wider variety of just factory BMW wheels that I can run. I'd like to get into an 18x10 so that I can get a little bit more meat on here, cut the fenders, put some wide body flares on, and run like a 315 in the rear, keep the 275s in the front, maybe 295 if possible. For steering, I would really like to get rid of the power steering. I've been doing a lot of research into doing an electric swap, and I know that sounds ridiculous, but I would like to get some weight off of the front, and I would like to have some programmability. The servotronic on these is getting very expensive, and a lot of the electric steering is now programmable, at least in the aftermarket, with GPS and all sorts of different things that you can do to it. So I've been putting a lot of research time into figuring out what that would look like. And then potentially in the future, it might get an engine swap. The S62 in this is super duper healthy. I've never had any issues with it, but in all honesty, I haven't done the bearings and I haven't done the timing chains. So those are potential issues. However, they make no noise and I'm comfortable with the way it is. This thing will sit for months at a time, start up without hesitation. There's no Vanos noise, there's no knock. The only thing I ever get is the occasional lifter tick for a couple of minutes until it primes up and the noise goes away. So that's the car in a nutshell. I hope that you enjoyed the story time and seeing where it came from and how I got here. If you have questions about the car, drop them in the comments. I'd love to answer them. And if you're building a car, shoot us a link. Let everybody know what you're doing, whether it's on Instagram, Facebook, or wherever. That way we can follow your build too. We look forward to seeing those builds, and maybe I'll get some ideas for what I can do to my car. Thanks for watching.